Welcome to Coding After Work stream. As usual, we want to start by thanking our sponsors, Progress Telerik. They make amazing Blazor UI components, and I think it's the biggest suite on the market.
Mm-hmm. Over 75 components.
Yeah, that's great.
Insane.
Chances are they have what we need, right?
Mm-hmm.
We will add a link to that in the chat later on. But now, let's bring in our guest.
Let's do that. Let's see if I can do that. There we go.
Hey,
Welcome,
here I
Guy
am.
Royse.
Yeah.
How
Hello,
have you
everyone.
been?
Oh, I've been pretty good.
Yeah.
I believe the expression is fair to Midland, but actually probably a little bit better than that. Yeah, things have been good.
We were debating when we first met. Do you remember where we were?
I think it was in Virginia
Stir
Beach.
Trek. Was it?
I'm not sure.
Because
I know
we've also seen each other on Stir Trek in Ohio and also in Sofia, I believe.
Yeah. I remember hanging out in the speaker lounge with you and enjoying the salty licorice candies that you brought from Sweden. I am one of those rare Americans that enjoys that. So
Yeah. Well, there's licorice and there's licorice, right?
yeah.
The cherry
And then we've got that
ones,
red
not
stuff.
as
Yeah, we got that red stuff here in the U.S. that we call licorice, but is really just strawberry flavored things that allegedly make your mouths happy. Yeah.
We still eat it. We don't like it, but we still eat it because
Because candy.
that it is one of the better candies in America, though.
True.
I didn't say it's good though. Just.
I really hate cherry. So being in the US, it can be tricky. Everything red can be cherry, or it could be strawberry.
And in Sweden, it's either strawberry or raspberry.
Yeah.
So never.
Yeah, sometimes it's raspberry here too, but raspberry's usually blue.
Really? Yeah. Why? What is up with that?
Yeah, I don't know, because I go out and raspberries grow wild here, but they're like black, or they're really dark purple.
Oh,
and so
there
they're the black raspberries, and the red ones you can cultivate, but none of them are blue. So I don't know.
Well,
arguably blueberries aren't very blue either. So
There's probably no strawberries or raspberries in there anyway. So
yeah.
that's what I like about American candy or sweets or drinks and stuff like that. It usually says artificial and natural flavored. Like, why are you bragging about the artificial stuff?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is there's not that much difference, because it could be natural flavor, but the way it is extracted isn't the way you think. So, for example, natural almond flavoring, you would think that would come from almonds, right? But it doesn't. They grind up peach pits and apricot pits and extract the almond flavoring from those instead. And so they're using it. There's an industrial process that does it anyhow, and so they both feel equally. And so it's kind of, and then you have the same chemical when you're done.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a bunch of fun stuff or odd stuff going on.
Yeah. But maybe because the source material is natural, then it's a natural flavoring as opposed to an artificial flavoring, which is made with a chemical reaction. But ultimately,
I wonder what the rules are here, because we are very strict in Europe, and especially, well, not especially Sweden, but that's the one I know. But that would be interesting.
Yeah, I know that the funny result of that is that the peach pits and apricot pits and those sorts of big seeds in your fruit tend to have trace amounts of cyanide in them. And so the natural almond flavoring actually has trace amounts of cyanide in it, whereas the one that's made chemically is just pure almond flavoring. So one is actually safer to consume than the other, in as much as having a 1 part per billion of cyanide matters. Yeah.
It depends on how much you digest, right?
Yeah. This is the riveting WebAssembly content everyone came for, isn't it?
Let's start with cyanide.
Yeah. Cyanide and happiness, yeah. Other webcomics are available, yeah.
Is that how much we dislike or like WebAssembly?
Well,
Let's
let's
find out. Yeah.
Yeah, let's find out. Yeah.
So what's up with WebAssembly?
Well, there's a lot of things up. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening, but it's all still, well, happening. A lot of WebAssembly. There's a lot of things I want to do with WebAssembly that I can't do yet because a lot of the specs are still being pounded out. But the web stuff works pretty well, and so that's a very safe area to play. I mean, we were talking just before we started streaming about how Blazor is using that, and so for the web side of WebAssembly, it's fantastic. The server side of WebAssembly is got a lot of things it's still figuring out. There's stuff there, but there's stuff that still needs to be solved yet, standards that still need to be pounded out that keep you from doing all the things you'd like to do. And this actually kind of reminds me of a fun thing about WebAssembly, which is it's actually neither web nor assembly.
Who named it?
Right, all right, I know, right? Well, it was originally web. The idea was let's create a virtual machine for the browser, a la the Java virtual machine, or the .NET Common Language Runtime. That sort of virtual machine, not virtual machine as in like VirtualBox, but virtual as in a virtual microprocessor. And so the idea was you could in Java and in .NET and in WebAssembly is you could write code in a higher level language and compile it to this intermediate bytecode, which could then be run by an interpreter that is a virtual microprocessor. And then that interpreter could get really smart and do just-in-time compilation and things like that. And in Java and in .NET, this is well-established territory. We've been doing this for decades now. I remember when I was first introduced to Java back in the 90s, that everyone said, oh, it's slow. And it was. But then the just-in-time compilation, where you could like target exactly the microprocessor that was on your machine, as opposed to, well, this needs to run on all x86 platforms. And so using the simplest instruction set, what you could do is you could compile to the specific machine it was running on right that minute. And so WebAssembly is sort of that model for the browser. It gives you that potential, that speed, and that language independence. You can compile your language to WebAssembly, and then it runs in the browser. It's bytecode for the browser. So that's web, right? WebAssembly. But what's happened is that WebAssembly has it's pulled a Node. So Node took JavaScript to the server by adding I/O. And WebAssembly is going down that path as well. Standards are being pounded out. There's a couple different tools that'll use it. I like to use WASM time myself. Would allow me to do things like read and write standard I/O, read and write to files, that sort of stuff. So it's adding I/O. And so that means it's not web exclusively. It's really just a virtual machine. And we happen to have a version that runs in the browser, but you also have a version that doesn't run in the browser. So you can do server-side or web. So it's not web. And WebAssembly isn't actually assembly language. Assembly language is that textual representation of that bytecode. I like to say it's a one-to-one relationship where this operation in WebAssembly translates to this byte in the bytecode, but that's not strictly true. But assembly languages kind of work that way, right? You write an assembly, and then it's more or less a one-to-one correlation for, I type this instruction, that means this byte is going into the microprocessor to say, pull this value from the accumulator and add it to this memory location or something like that. But assembly is that language that goes into bytecode. So WebAssembly is actually not an assembly language. It's actually a bytecode language. So it's not assembly language either. So it's neither web nor assembly. There is an assembly
really
language.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It sounds really cool though, right?
Yeah.
and branding matters, right? But there is actually an assembly language to go with WebAssembly, and it's called the WebAssembly text format. And so you can program in this language, and I have code from it. I'll show today, where I actually have written in the assembly language for WebAssembly. I will put the caveat on that I don't actually recommend doing this for real code. This is such a low-level language that it's just, I'm doing it for fun and education and to sort of show how the thing works. But actually doing this to build applications of any scale where it's like, I don't actually have, like one of the things that's missing in WebAssembly is there's no instruction to do exponentiation. So I can't do 2 to the power of 4. So I have to write a function to do that. Right? I don't want to program in that language day to day. But it's fun to explore and to understand how it works. So
I can see why you don't want to do that every day.
yeah. It's still better than back in the 6502 microprocessor for those who had Apple IIe's and Commodore 64s. They didn't have a multiply operator, and so you had to actually do addition in a loop to multiply.
Wow. I did not know that.
So you actually would write a function, or I guess it would be a subroutine would be the better way to describe it in assembly language, where you would every program would have to write a multiply function.
We are so spoiled today.
Yeah.
We don't have to do anything.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love being spoiled. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Excuse me. So, but yeah, so I just sort of started spouting off what WebAssembly stuff. But so what's your background in WebAssembly? And if there's people in chat, what's your background in WebAssembly?
So me personally, I use Blazor. So Blazor is running the mono runtime compiled to WebAssembly. And you've been reading a book,
I've been reading a book by someone who's writing about Blazor.
Who could that be?
I don't know. I know a couple of people, actually.
That's true.
But I'm only reading yours, though.
Yeah. Whenever I think of Blazor, I always think of sort of that Yo Dog meme. Because what you've done is you've taken the .NET CLR and compiled it, the .NET runtime, which is a virtual machine, and compiled it to WebAssembly, which is a virtual machine. And so you've put a virtual machine in a virtual machine. It's like, Yo Dog, I heard you liked virtual machines, so... It's just what it always makes me think of. It's like, maybe we could run this inside a Docker, and then we could just... It's like Matryoshka VMs, right? You just keep pulling them apart.
How far can we take this?
Yeah. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cough today. So. Apologies. So it's a little gauche to drink on stream, but yeah. So, are there any specific questions you have, or I mean, I've got a whole bunch of stuff I can kind of show. I don't really have a plan. So if there's something in particular that you'd like to see, or someone in the audience would like to see, I can see what I've got and pull something up. Imagine you probably wouldn't mind seeing some WebAssembly text format code. That might be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Let's start with that.
Okay. So I have an implementation of FizzBuzz that I have written in WebAssembly text format. This is not the implementation of FizzBuzz. This is just Visual Studio Code. but
I have a fun story about FizzBuzz. We're looking for a new developer at my old workplace, and there was a guy that came in, and we said, "Could you please write FizzBuzz for us? We wanted to see, does he have the ability to think logically?"
Yeah.
So he was just writing it on paper. It wasn't important about syntax and all of that. And when we got it back, we were like, what in the world? What have you? So he didn't know about modulus. That it was actually, it existed in .NET. So he wrote his own. So talking about writing the subroutine in 6502, he did it by himself. We were like, what? How? Okay.
Poor person. What did he think about you? Like, why are they putting me through all this?
That's both incredibly impressive and incredibly sad at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
On the one hand, was his implementation of modulus good?
We never tested it, but I assume it was.
Because that's a lot of reasoning to to tease that out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to not know that fundamental thing, it honestly smacks of someone who's very smart but doesn't have a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm.
which might mean they're, depending on what you're looking for, might be worth hiring someone like that.
I mean, they solved the problem.
Definitely.
And they thought outside of the box.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Totally outside of the box.
In a completely different box.
He couldn't even see the box.
Yeah. Well, I always like to say that, when I'm looking for people, I want to hire talent and rent skill. So I want to hire smart people that can do lots of things and that have aptitude and talent, and I can throw them things they haven't done before and they can figure it out. But if I have a specific problem a task that I know, and it just requires someone who knows XYZ thing really well, that's just something you go get a consultant for that. But the people you bring into your company that you want to keep for a long time, you get someone that's just got a lot of raw talent is actually more valuable. So,
yeah, that's
sort of my hiring philosophy.
There is no box.
Only Zool.
And the box is a lie.
So, can I go off on a tangent?
Please do.
Go.
I saw this news report from this thing in Oklahoma. There's this old, it's an old saloon or something. And everyone is believed to be haunted. And this guy was like a ghost hunter, and he was going in and trying to find the ghost and talking about how there was a ghost here. And in there was like a chalkboard or a blackboard of some sort. And occasionally messages would appear on it. He'd go and check periodically, and there'd be messages on it. And he was talking about how, these messages are evidence that there's ghosts here. And one of the messages that had been scrawled on this board was, "The cake is a lie." And he, in all seriousness on this news broadcast, is trying to explain to the reporter, what does this mean? Is this some sort of metaphor or some experience that this ghost has had in a previous life? It was just so absurd. It's like it's from a video game.
That's too fun too.
Well, the funny part there is right. You're coming into this abandoned place, and and there's random graffiti. Obviously, it's ghosts and not teenagers, right?
Yeah, of course.
Couldn't be teenagers.
Why would a teenager write "the cake is a lie"?
Yeah. Why would they? Mm-hmm. Why would a teenager hang out in an abandoned building? Because that never happens, right? I bet you they probably drank too. There's probably beer bottles lying around.
Yeah, that's a ghost. Ghost
does clearly, that. Yeah, it's clearly a ghost. Yeah.
They came for the cake, but.
Yeah, but
stayed for the beer.
They got in a shootout instead, because this was out west in Oklahoma, I guess. I don't know. So, yeah. Sorry, the cake is a lie made me think of that story. It has nothing to do with anything. It's just a funny story.
Frederick wonders if the box wasn't a tangent.
Yeah, right. It's all tangents. It's just tangents all the way down. Yeah. So let's look at FizzBuzz. So one thing with WebAssembly is that there's not a good definition for strings. And if you think about the fact that WebAssembly is a virtual microprocessor, microprocessors don't know what strings are, right? What's a string? Well, it's a bunch of bytes. It's an array of bytes. That's a very simplistic version of describing a string. Depending on your encoding, that could, it could be an array of characters, and the characters could be more than one byte or not, depending on like if you're using UTF-8 or something like that. But that sort of gets to the point of what's a string is different languages and different encodings will define strings differently. So WebAssembly can't say, I know what a string is. So it just knows numbers. And so my implementation of FizzBuzz here does not return strings because that's hard. You can do it. There's ways to do it, but you have to pick a string implementation. And your JavaScript code that's going to consume this won't necessarily know about that string implementation. And so it actually then has to take the bytes and turn them into the string. So it's actually kind of a big pain in the butt. I have done it, and I'll show you what it looks like for another one. But for here, we've got FizzBuzz. And so what I'm doing is
enlarge the font a little
bit.
Yeah,
let me embiggen that just a bit. That should be.
There we go.
Now make it so that you can actually see it. There we go. That should be readable now. It looks like I got some weird clipping on StreamYard here, but hopefully this works. But so what I've done instead of returning fizz and buzz and FizzBuzz is I'm just returning -1, -2, and -3. And then my FizzBuzz only does positive numbers. So because if you were handed a negative number, then obviously -1 could also mean -1, not just fizz.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of have a conceit that I'm only going to do positive numbers. But since FizzBuzz is a drinking game where you count, that feels legitimate, right? You know, because the whole point of FizzBuzz is 1, 2, fizz. Oh, I said it correctly, so I don't have to take a drink, right? it's a drinking game where as you mess up what number you're supposed to say when you're counting in a circle, right? You know, you get drunk, and then the more you drink, the harder it is to keep track of what you're doing, and then which means you drink even more, and which is the joyous essence of all drinking games. So that's what I'm doing here. So I've got here a module. Every bit of WebAssembly text format starts with this little module thing. And we've got a parenthesis here at the beginning, and you may not be surprised to learn at all that there is a parenthesis at the end. So we've got this open close parenthesis sort of thing happening. It's got a kind of a Lispy-like syntax to it. After the module, I have an export. This is saying export a function called FizzBuzz to JavaScript, or whatever it's going to call this. And that function is mapped to $FizzBuzz, which is my actual implementation of that function. So this is just saying, take a function I wrote internally here and give it an outside name. That's all that says. My actual FizzBuzz function here is func $FizzBuzz. Are you seeing all this code okay? Because I'm seeing the preview here, and it looks like some of it's clipping off. I
think we're seeing it good.
Okay, because when I rescaled it, it looks kind of funky. So, but that may just be an artifact on my side with Firefox. So I just want to make sure people are seeing it okay. So func $FizzBuzz right here is me defining a function. It is a function that takes a parameter of a 32-bit integer, and I'm going to make that $num. And then this function returns a 32-bit integer. So this is my function signature. Takes a number as an input, spits a number back out. Here I'm defining two local variables that I'm going to use later, whether it's a multiple of 5 and whether it's a multiple of 3. And then I'm going to set that using local.set and that variable name. And then that is calling an isMultiple function that I've written, passing in my local number, this value right here, this argument was passed in, and passing in constants of 5. And same thing for isMultiple of 3. I do the same function I call isMultiple and pass in a different constant. And so all these...
question. Is this based on some existing language?
I'm going to go with no. Not that I'm aware of. It does have a Lisp aspect to it. So, for example, this local local set $5, whatever's inside the parentheses are going to get evaluated first. And so, like the bit I have highlighted right now, local.get $num, and i32.const5, this call right here will push the value that was passed in as the argument, $num, onto the stack. And then the next one will push i32, push a constant number onto the stack, push this number 5 onto the stack. And then when I call isMultiple, it will pop those two values off the stack and hand them to that function. And then whatever isMultiple returns is going to be pushed onto the stack. So this will do 2 pops and then a push. So, and then the local.set will take whatever's on the stack and set it to a local variable, popping the stack. So that the stack pops and pushes constantly as ways of passing arguments around. Here we've got a simple i32 and. It takes a local get to $5 and $3. So if it's a multiple of 5 and if it's a multiple of 3, then I return -3 because that's FizzBuzz. If it's a multiple of 5, it's -2. If it's a multiple of 3, it's -1. And I'm just returning a constant value here. And then here, otherwise I return the number you handed me. So that's sort of the quick logic. Here's the isMultiple of. And I just get a remainder here. I define a little remainder. Local.set remainder. I call the remainder unsigned. So take 2 numbers, get the modulus. There's that modulus operator.
Yeah.
And then and I just pass in the number and the divisor that was passed in as an argument up here. So this function up here takes 2 arguments and returns a 32-bit number. And then here I'm using equals e. Does it equal 0 or not? If it equals 0, it returns a 1. If it does not equal 0, it returns a 0. So this, yeah. So a lot of these functions, they're operands or operators, return, they do this, the C style, 0 is false, non-zero is true. And so equals 0 is in effect inverting the value that I have. And so this is a little FizzBuzz implementation. And I can compile this. Am I in the right folder here? Yes, I am. Hang on.
Is that a monkey?
It is. My computer, you can use emojis in your prompt, and you'll notice that my machine name is MacacBook.
Oh, nice.
So that's why I used the monkey emoji as my prompt.
I love it.
I thought Mac. I was thinking, what do I call my new? I always like to give my computers fun names, and it's a MacBook. It's a MacacBook. Yeah. And I gave it them. So it's possible that I'm weird.
No. My red Surface laptop is called Scarlet Witch because it's red and all that.
I usually try to do something that sounds like it rhymes with Mac. So I like my personal MacBook is my Yak Book. And I had a Smack Book for a while because I thought that was funny. And a Snack Book. Yeah, use a little chocolate bar as the icon. I had a little tiny, I still got it here. This is my first MacBook I was issued for work. It was one of the smaller ones. I put the fun sticker on there. But it's a smaller, underpowered one, so I called it the Big MacBook. So... And I use a little hamburger icon. So I'm always trying to come up with some fun. For my
I love that.
Well, I have to look at it all day.
I have another question.
Yeah. I got to make it fun. So yes, this is messing with my head that there's nothing between the low-level machine code and what looks like a high-level language. Well, this is, as assembly languages go, this is a pretty easy one. To be fair. So if you've ever actually gone down to like assembly language code, assembly language, they are a little more managing memory oriented. So like this is stack based, and so that's really convenient. But if you're working at an actual microprocessor level, the stack's not really I can't say this definitively because a lot of my machine programming experience is really old microprocessors from the 80s. But there was no stack on the 6502. And so you just had some different accumulators, registers you could put values in and pull in and out of. And then you had to keep track of, well, I put this in this register and this in this register. And then I'd call something to read a memory value and put it in another register. And so there was more, it was fiddlier, right? There was more stuff to keep track of. Here it's just push stuff on a stack and then it pops off and it's a little easier to think about. But it is still pretty accessible. But how do we actually turn this WebAssembly text file, this fizzbuzz.wat that we have right here, into code? Well, the WebAssembly binary toolkit called Wabbit, and yes, that's funny.
No.
It's called Wabbit, has a tool called wat to wasm. So wat to wasm, and then I pass in fizzbuzz.wat. And so Wabbit will take wat to wasm. We'll use wat to wasm to take fizzbuzz.wat and turn it into a wasm file. And you can see it's very quick.
No.
Right. And now I have a whopping 111 bytes as my compiled WebAssembly file. If you do a hex dump, this does WASM. We can see that is the sum total of that code. Which is pretty cool, right? I mean, if you look at the amount of code I wrote compared to the amount of compilation I have, this is pretty compact. I mean, if you think about the code I would write to do this, well, I was going to say in JavaScript, right? So, and it's going to be faster because it's compiled. And if I want to run this, I can run this in a browser. I've actually got a little Jasmine test runner thing set up to run this. But in order for it to, let's go ahead and run it. Let's see, how do I want to do this here? So I've got a little Python file here that's my server. And this just runs a little web server with Python. I'm using this because I want to make sure the content type of application / WASM is actually handled. Otherwise, I would just do something simpler. But we can do Python 3 server. Oh, I got to go up a folder. Server.py. It's listening in port 80. And if I rerun this here, 3 have passed. The other are going to fail because it's going to test for the Rust modules as well. And I haven't compiled the Rust version of this. So this is sort of like the low-level stuff, but Rust is like a really good language for doing WebAssembly programming in. It supports it out of the box. I'm not a Rust expert, but if I was doing WebAssembly for my day job and not building sort of toys and trying to understand the lower levels technology of it, I would use Rust to do it. There are other languages that support it as well, but Rust is, I think, but probably the earliest adopter. There's you can do it in C as well, and there's actually a language called Assembly Script, which is I'm going to call it a fork of TypeScript. Metaphorically, it's a fork. It's not literally a fork of TypeScript, but it's Assembly Script is a TypeScript-like language that compiles exclusively to WebAssembly. And so there are other languages you can do this in. So here I've got 8 failures and 16 specs. If I go to look at my spec list here, I can see that all my WebAssembly tech stuff passed. My Rust didn't work because I didn't compile it. We can fix that. Here, let's just open up a new terminal, and we'll change into the Rust folder. Change directory. I'm very, you can tell I practiced this a lot, right? So if we look at the Rust code, you can see the implementation in Rust is a lot easier. Right.
Yeah.
Right. This is sort of the sort of language we know and expect and love. And if I go ahead and build it, it should be Rust or cargo build target WASM WebAssembly 32 unknown dash release. That'll give me a release build of it. And I did something wrong here. I know I did this earlier. I'm sure I've just got a typo in my log here.
That's usually one of the biggest things that you need to think about when you're coding and when you're using a terminal like this. Do you want to type it again, or do you want to press up until you find it again?
Well, sometimes I get desperate. I do the history pipe grep thing I'm looking for. I forgot the double dashes on target.
Yeah. Nice catch.
Yeah. So this creates a nice little release build here under WASM 32 unknown release. And then here is fizzbuzz.wasm right there. So if I run my little sample now, this should pass. So now it passes and runs very quickly. And these are both running in WebAssembly and in Rust.
Cool.
If we take a look at, let's go to target, build. And if we see that, now that's 258 bytes, so it's a little bit bigger. And if we do a hex dump here, you can see that it'll probably still fit on the screen. Not quite, but close.
But almost.
Yeah. So it's still very tiny, right? So,
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can do, this low level WebAssembly stuff in, Rust as well. It's pretty cool. So that's FizzBuzz.
Are there many languages that you can compile down to WebAssembly?
There are several. I don't know that I have a canonical list of them in my head necessarily. Rust is sort of my go-to because I'd say it's got the most developed ecosystem around it. For example, there are web libraries in Rust that allow you to do all your client-side development in Rust Now, I mentioned that there's no idea, it doesn't know what strings are. But the other thing that WebAssembly can't do in the browser, I'll show this picture here. This big beige-ish box represents the browser, right? And in our browser, we've got we've got our trifecta of front-end web development. We've got our CSS, we have our HTML, and we have our JavaScript file, right? And so we've got our site.css, our index.html, and the JavaScript can manipulate all these things, right? It can manipulate the DOM. It can, this is a front-end app, right? We've done these before. WebAssembly is just these WASM files that I've been building are just other files that are downloaded from the web server. And so if I want to use a WebAssembly module in my client code, I can write JavaScript to go fetch that and instantiate it. And then I just have a bunch of methods on the objects I can call. So like if you look at the code here, it's a main.instance.exports. So main is the thing is the WebAssembly module I've instantiated. The instance is the instance within it. And then the exports is all the functions that we exported. So if you remember back, I had that little export section at the top. Those show up here. And then you just call them like a JavaScript function. So invoking this stuff is not very hard, really. The hardest part is knowing this little bit of, instantiate streaming WebAssembly call. But even that's not particularly difficult. And then they just return variables like you normally would. But you'll notice I've got all these arrows here, right? So the JavaScript can manipulate the DOM, and the JavaScript can call WebAssembly. And I've got an arrow from WebAssembly going to JavaScript. So one of the things you can do when you instantiate a WebAssembly module is it can import as well as export. And so you can write JavaScript functions that are imported into WebAssembly to do whatever you might want to use them for. You can use them as callbacks, but you can also use them to solve this problem, which is that there's no arrow between WebAssembly and the DOM. So in the browser, WebAssembly can't touch the DOM. It doesn't have access to it. It can't see it. And that's a big problem to solve. We haven't even agreed on what strings look like in WebAssembly, let alone want to do DOM manipulation. And so we have some prerequisites we got to work through first. But you can write JavaScript functions that manipulate the DOM and give them to WebAssembly. So your WebAssembly module can call that function, which will then in turn manipulate the DOM on its behalf. And what Rust does is they have a standard library of functions that will manipulate the DOM for you. And then the Rust libraries for the WebAssembly side expect those to exist and then delegate to them. So when you build a WebAssembly module in Rust using a front-end tool, it will assume those exist and then proxy any sort of... So you can... Yeah, WQuery, yeah. So you can do DOM manipulation functions in Rust that then are delegated to those JavaScript calls. And this is so that you can, as a developer, can build your front end and your back end in Rust, if that's how you want to live your life.
That's a big if.
Yeah.
Well, there's all sorts of developers.
Yeah. Now, as other languages come on board, you'll see similar solutions to that. There is an attempt to build WebAssembly interface types to try and address some of these strings and those sorts of things, but it's kind of still in the early days. It's not they're not, the standards aren't pounded out yet. But yeah, it's cool stuff.
It is.
Yeah. I'm pausing to give you guys a chance to ask me a question. Because I just been going, right?
I'm a little bit curious. What about speed? Is there any performance hits with using WebAssembly, or is the code faster than JavaScript, or?
It's faster, actually. I looked at some benchmark information. I went out and there's 1,000,001 benchmarks, and benchmarks are always kind of flawed. There's several ways a benchmark can be flawed. One could be I have an agenda and it's that I want to say WebAssembly's fast, and so then I make a benchmark that makes it look good. And then I just didn't think the problem through well enough, and so my benchmark isn't a really good example. But what I've seen in all the benchmarks, and then there's good benchmarks as well. The worst benchmark I saw showed, I think, about a 50% improvement in performance, and the best ones were like 20x. So regardless of where you're at on that continuum, I'm kind of looking at that as like extremes. It's like, I'm probably not going to get 20x all the time, but I probably could get better than 50% of an improvement over time too. So, would it be safe to say it's probably twice as fast? That seems reasonable. That's a guess, right? Based off of that continuum. But the key thing is that it is faster. And so, yeah, you can get some performance improvements. I think that has a lot of potential. I'm starting to see people doing WebAssembly for machine learning, where you can create models that are, you can do your inferencing inside of WebAssembly, or anything that's kind of compute heavy you need to do on the front end. WebAssembly would be a great candidate for that. If your app's just a bunch of DOM manipulation, then WebAssembly is probably the wrong solution. Because it's, that's kind of a solved problem. And because a lot of that's going to be happening in JavaScript anyhow. But if you've got something you got some heavy lifting that needs done, I think WebAssembly is a good candidate. I think you could even, I thought this would be interesting. Like, you've got a lot of front end frameworks where you could sort of put the core of them in WebAssembly and then build helper functions to bridge that gap. And you could take something like Svelte or something, and part of that could be written in WebAssembly and part of it could be written in JavaScript. And then that becomes sort of a front end tool that's a hybrid, and you maybe get a performance boost out of doing that. I haven't looked into the details of that. It's just sort of an idea that I've had, but I can imagine front end frameworks adopting this sort of approach for the performance benefits.
Yeah. I mean, Blazor is basically what you're describing. It's the mono runtime running .NET DLLs using JavaScript to communicate with the DOM.
Yeah, that's exactly how it has to do it. I mean, it's the only way it could do it, right?
So we talked about using WASM server side. We talked about it using it in the web browser. Is there any efforts in doing like desktop apps or something like that?
I haven't seen anyone do that specifically. Obviously, an Electron app is sort of a obvious candidate there, because that's really a web app. And I know that you could also do mobile apps this way as well. So, like, WebAssembly is supported by all of the browsers that you care about, including the mobile versions. And so, if you were, say, building a hybrid mobile native mobile app, where, like, say, you're using Ionic Framework or something like that, or where you're basically it's the Electron version of a mobile app, you could use WebAssembly with those. I don't know if you could use WebAssembly with React Native, because there's not really a browser involved there. There's a JavaScript runtime, but there's not a browser. So I'm not sure how that would work, but some of the server-side WebAssembly stuff might work with that. You might be able to cobble it together, but I don't know that anyone's made a happy path to make that a way of building an app. Because like one of the tools that I've been using lately on the server side is WASM Time, and it'll let me run WebAssembly from the command line, but it also will allow you to take WebAssembly modules. WASM Time has libraries for Python and Rust and C, so that you can take the bytecode of WebAssembly and load it up into WASM Time from a library, and then run it from that code. So you could write some Python code that takes the bytes of a WebAssembly file and then lets you call the functions on that WebAssembly module. And so you might be able to do something like that in React Native. Maybe. There are C libraries. There's C stuff in the mobile space behind the scenes somewhere there eventually. At least in iOS, there is a C layer in there somewhere. You might be able to exploit that. But actually, I think WASM Time has a Swift version, so it might be really easy on iOS. I haven't looked at it.
There you go. Is it possible to reach outside of the browser in WASM, for instance, network calls or things like local storage?
The short answer is no. The long answer is that you can do that the same way you can do DOM manipulation. You can write JavaScript functions that do that on your behalf and then invoke them. But WebAssembly can't do that directly. Now, on the server side, there's WASI, which is the WebAssembly systems interface or system interface, which WASM supports and other backend runtimes. What's the other one? I can't remember the name of it. I feel bad they keep emailing me, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But they have the WAPM, which is the package manager, the WebAssembly package manager, which and they have a runtime that goes with that, and the name of it is escaping me. But those do have file I/O and some network I/O, but not quite. So, like with WASI, the standards are in place for doing file I/O and standard I/O, and they've got socket send and socket receive implemented, but they don't have any functions implemented yet to actually open and close sockets, which is like, it's just like so tantalizingly close. because as soon as you can build WebAssembly code that can open a socket on the server side, then that opens a lot of doors, right? I work for Redis, and one of the things that I want to do is I want to build a Redis client in WebAssembly so that I can talk about WebAssembly as part of my job. It'd be great.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. You can't open it yet. And so it's getting there. It's just not there yet. And so this stuff's all very cutting edge, bleeding edge. I do have some example of FizzBuzz where I do file I/O as well, or standard I/O. I don't know that I necessarily want to go through the code. That's not it. In detail, but I can at least show it running. Are we there yet? There it is, FizzBuzz IO. If I collapse this down here, expand that out. So here's my WebAssembly text format file. We'll go ahead and so what this does is here's the import. I mentioned you can import functions from JavaScript. Well, with WASI on WASM time, or with WASI, you can import things from WASI. This right here says WASI _ unstable, tells you everything you need to know about using this library for production, which is don't. Right. And then I've got the FD write, so file descriptor write. And if you've done a lot of C programming, some of these things will look familiar. And then file descriptor write takes 4 arguments and returns a result. And just to sort of show how it handles strings, I'm going to scroll down here. I've got this really crazy code here, right? So one of the things you can do in WebAssembly is it can have a memory block associated with it. It's just in JavaScript, actually, you can see it. It's just an array. It's just a big byte array. And so I'm storing things in there. I'm saying store in memory at position 12, at pointer location 12, the value 0, and store at position 16, the value 4. And if we go up for 0 and 4 here, I have this little data command where I've preloaded my memory after I loaded and said at position 0, put these values. So I've got the word FizzBuzz. I have a carriage return. I have a space, a dash, and a space. Right. And so what this code down here is doing is I'm storing in memory position 12, which is beyond that stuff that I just defined. I'm saying the word fizz is at location 0 in memory. And it is 4 bytes long. So this is at position 12 now. I have a pointer to position 12 is a pointer to the number 0 and the number 4, which says there's a thing at position 0 that's 4 bytes long that's a string. And then for buzz, I say, I got a pointer in position 20, and at position 4, there's a 4 byte string, which is the buzz part of that string. And then fizzbuzz, I go back to position 0 and I say it's 8 long. So I sort of like point into that same memory stuff twice. So I'm defining strings for all of the variables I'm going to use in here. So this is stupid, crazy, low level code. And this just shows you how, strings are hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
apparently.
once I have these, I can, if I scroll down here, this is a very long implementation of fizzbuzz. All this program does is loops through the number counts from 1 to 50 and calculates fizzbuzz for it and writes it out to standard IO. That's all this thing does. It is 235 lines long. I had to write my own increment and decrement functions because they don't exist.
And then you add UTF-8 into the mix.
You shut up. Yes, that's exactly right. Actually, it's not too hard necessarily from the JavaScript side, because JavaScript can take this byte array and you can just say, go from here to here, tack a 0 on the end of it, and now you've got a null terminated string. And there's decoders in JavaScript. So if you had UTF-8 in there, it would work. So I've actually embedded emoji inside of WebAssembly. Like these bytes here, you can actually, all the way at the top here, I can put in, my monkey. And that's, that's actually, it will compile. Well, assemble. It will assemble. We're not compiling, we're assembling here. So you can do that. I'm not going to do that because it'll break everything. But
But you could put a monkey in, well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like I got this little function called write fizz, and I call write standard IO. Write standard IO takes a pointer to one of these locations. Here it is. So that just takes a location in memory where I want it to write to read from to write out to standard IO. And in there, it will then get the location of the string and the length of the string. And so I pass into fdwrite the file descriptor. 1 is standard out. I pass in my pointer to this array of things I want to print out. I say how many items are in the array. So this actually will say, if you have several of these string structures in memory, you can say, well, there's 5 of them. Go through and do all 5. And then it'll store the number of bytes I wrote somewhere. I don't care about the number of bytes I wrote. I just wanted to write it. And so it'll push those on the stack, and I don't want that. So I will drop that value. But if I assemble this, whoops, not that way. There we go. So using WASM again.
Bytes.
What's that?
The Avengers are bytes.
Yeah.
Avengers, assemble.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can actually put emoji bugs in your code. So you can have real bugs in your code.
That's right. So this is a little bit bigger. It
Mm-hmm.
comes in at 609 bytes from 6.1 kilobytes of code. So it compressed it down quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
By about an order of magnitude. And then I can use WASM time here and run fizzbuzz.wasm. And then they just tore through that pretty quickly, as you would imagine. And 1, 2, 3, it just counts to 50 and says which one of these are fizz and buzz, and it does what it does, right?
Yeah.
And so WASI provides that file IO capability, which is desperately needed to make this a viable server-side thing. And it's not quite there yet, but it's getting really close. I'm excited for it. I'm anxiously awaiting the socket standard, the socket function, so that I can actually do some IO against some sort of network service. Because once you can do that, then everything opens up, right? One of the things you can do, I think is kind of cool, and I think this will be a pattern that people tend to use in the future, is the imports. Your imports that you hand in when you import functions, those imports can actually be other WebAssembly modules, because WebAssembly modules are just bags of functions. And so you can write WebAssembly modules that solve, like, you can write libraries, right? You could write a library of math functions, increment, decrement, and exponent for one would be the first three I would write. And then people could bring those in and not have to write those ever again. And so you could start assembling these as like lots of little modules together and build applications that pull them all together, which means there's probably need for a nice dependency injection library to sort of manage how that all fits together. That feels a couple steps out yet.
We do have a question about the socket stuff. Why do you think it hasn't progressed yet?
The short answer is standards are hard. And so
Yeah.
there's a standards organization that's putting this together. It's a hard problem to solve. A lot of these people are volunteers working outside of the normal day job. And so they're putting together these specs, and it just takes time. That's really all it boils down to. I'd say we've progressed a lot in the last year, last couple of years. When I first looked at WebAssembly, none of the server-side stuff was available. And it's only been, I think, about 2 years since I really started looking at it. So it's actually moving pretty quickly. It's building a whole new tech stack, and that just takes a lot of time.
How old is WebAssembly? I mean, I heard about it. Well, I think it was at your talk the first time. How has it existed for a long time?
I heard about it initially about 3 years ago, and at the time it hadn't hit 1.0 yet. So the standard was being worked on. It wasn't fully implemented by all the browsers. And when it hit 1.0, I started experimenting with it. And that was, let's see, I guess it's been about 3 years now. So maybe it's about 4 years old. It's been in my consciousness for about 3.5 years, I'd say, roughly.
But that's not long.
No, it's not. Not for a whole new tech stack.
No, exactly.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
4 years old, and all the major browsers supports it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably older than that. And this is just when it's when it bubbled up to enough prominence that it came to my attention. I'd have to Google to find out when the standard was actually started. So please don't misquote me and say, Guy said it's 4 years old, and
it's
and
exactly
he's a liar.
4 years old.
On the day.
It's his birthday.
Happy birthday, WebAssembly. You have the misfortune of being born on American Tax Day. Yeah.
Actually, it might be even older.
No, so 2015.
Stacey is Googling for us. Thank you.
So we're at 6 years. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's
But
still,
it's still
sounds about right.
impressive, I would say. What's the craziest WebAssembly implementation you have seen? Or done?
I might go with done. I created
Okay, it was announced 2015, Stacey said. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I did a full-on enterprise. You've seen the enterprise FizzBuzz joke. There's a repository out there for enterprise FizzBuzz written in Java, and it's got like a FizzBuzz factory manager and all those sorts of things.
There's what?
And enterprise FizzBuzz, it needs to scale. We could change our underlying modulus algorithm to do something else. Who knows what could happen? We need to protect ourselves from all these edge cases.
For FizzBuzz, of course.
Yeah, for FizzBuzz. We might need to swap out the mechanism by which we determine fizz or buzz or both. Yeah. But I did something similar to that. I created a fully functioning web app that just front end only, that was a FizzBuzz calculator with a model and a view and a controller and everything. And I ended up writing about 1,000 lines of WebAssembly code, all in WebAssembly text format.
Of course.
It is out on GitHub for you to enjoy if you want to take a look at it. I haven't looked at it in a couple of years, so it might have some slightly more dated operands and stuff like that in it. But yeah,
I'm with Stacey. That's awesome.
it was fun to do. I ended up building a math.wasm to handle all my math stuff. I had to write an I to A function. Remember in C, you got the integer to alpha to turn a number into a string. because I needed to be able to actually display the string value back. I had the FizzBuzz function needed to return a string. And it's like, well, it can't return a string or a number. It's got to return a string. And it's really returning a pointer to a string. And then I had to create my own library for turning my definition of strings. And I used null terminated C-style strings. So I had to write a little function to do that on the JavaScript side and everything. It was a ton of code for no good purpose.
Well, it does sound a little bit fun, though.
It was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
I can't believe I got paid to do it. Yeah.
That's even
Even
better.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure my employer at the time doesn't know that I was paid to do it either, so that might be.
Oops. I do believe there is a version of Doom, I think, written in WebAssembly.
Yeah, you could probably
Because
do that.
why not?
Yeah, it
because
was
why
probably
not?
written in C and compiled to WebAssembly would be my guess.
Yes. Yes.
Isn't the Doom code available?
I think
didn't-
so. Yeah.
I know ID Software back in the day released I remember they released the source code for Castle Wolfenstein. Or is it Wolfenstein? I can't remember. But anyhow,
It's probably Stein because
Wolfenstein,
Germany.
I'll try to pronounce my German words properly, but I don't actually know any German, so all of my German ends with Rammstein, so
There you go.
I
That's the extent of Jimmy's German as well.
Okay, so this happened. I was in town, and there was a German family coming up to me, and I know my German comes from Rammstein and from Kraftwerk. That's it.
And there's not a lot of words. Just putting it out there.
Ich bin ein Roboter. So,
Here?
I think so.
Is it a robot?
No, not
Oh,
in German.
maybe.
I don't
Okay.
know. This family comes up to me and they say, "Do you speak German or sprechen Sie Deutsch?" I'm sorry if you have any Germans in here.
Yeah.
And I'm so. If you get that question, I think I've gotten that question twice or three times. What you should not answer at that point is 9. Because, you understood what I said. So you do speak German. This has happened to me way too many times. So I find myself explaining to them in German.
No. In Rammstein.
Trying to explain, du bist hier. And I have no sense of direction. I have no idea how I ended up in that situation. So I explained to them how to get to wherever they wanted to go in German with no sense of direction. I have no idea. Maybe they're still walking about Stockholm trying to find that.
But you did know how to address the mother.
Yeah.
Because there's a song. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a song.
Some kind of robot. There's some kind of radioactivity. Do you
Some
have any
kind of
questions
mother.
about that?
Yeah, I've actually I managed to read some Swedish once.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a Wikipedia article that my friend Magnus, who's Swedish, he lives up in Toledo, in Ann Arbor, Michigan now. He used to live in Toledo, Ohio, and he's a American. I think he's an American citizen now, but regardless, he sent this article about name days, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what name days are. I'm an American, and but I read the article and I'm like, I can figure out what this all says. I was actually able to read the article. I'm like, I don't speak any Swedish. I've never even tried, but I'm sure hearing it would be very different. But
Yeah, definitely. So for those of you who don't know what name days is, we put in our calendars, we put 1, 2, 3 names for every day, and then you have like a mini birthday, which is your name day, but nobody really celebrates it except your mom.
Yeah. Or my sister, actually. So everyone that is named Jimmy, for example. Actually, not Jimmy, because that doesn't exist. But Jessica, for example, so everyone that's named Jessica say, "Oh, congratulations, Jessica,
For having a name that we
You have
put
a
in
name."
our calendar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one
so
more
that's
reason
name
to people
days.
knowing me on Facebook, right?
No, that's fine because nobody knows these stuff. Only the people who really cares, like your mom and your sister, and your sister only cares because she wants to fault you for not remembering what day her name day is. That's the only purpose. But other than that, nobody knows, and Facebook doesn't keep track of it, so it's not really an issue. And Jessica was moved, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is there like an official board that determines what names go on
Yes.
what days?
Yep.
That's kind of amazing.
No, it's insane. It's what it is. It's just a reason for more cake, I think.
I don't know if other countries has this as well.
I don't know. I don't know if any of the Scandinavians, the other Scandinavians,
I'd never heard of it
we
until
do a
then.
lot of similar. No,
Yeah.
it's kind of odd to explain to someone.
But it's
Yeah, we celebrate our names that we didn't choose.
it's predicated on the assumption that there's a finite number of names and that
Yeah.
the list will never change.
Yeah,
And,
they did start out with just one name for every date, but then they realized, oh, wait a minute, people are starting to name their babies other names than the one we are using. So they added another set of two. So now we have three, I think.
Yeah, but Jimmy was actually in there,
Yep.
and then they took it away.
Yep. Oh,
Was it
this
actually
name
in there as
sucks.
Jimmy or was it in there as James?
As Jimmy. Maybe James exists. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it's not a thing in Sweden to call James Jimmy.
No.
That makes
that
no
makes
sense. Jim would make sense to
Jim
call
do
Jimmy.
exist.
Yeah, that's why you're out. They picked one.
I don't
Is
have a
this
name
half
day.
your name? Do you want a cake on Jim Day?
Yes, I do. I want
Okay.
half a cake at
On
least.
Jim
the
Day.
cake, okay.
Jim Day and cake usually don't get together. Usually Jim Day is is it legs day or arms day, right? White meat or dark meat.
I heard it while I was saying it. Like, that's not coming out right.
I'm gonna have
Jim Day.
cake on my gym day.
I've been living my life like that for a long time. It's made me the man I am today.
So maybe that should be your WebAssembly project.
Name days?
Yeah. Is it Jimmy Day? Is it Cake Day?
That's a domain I don't have.
Oh gosh.
you could make it a should Jimmy eat cake function, and you could take the date and then ignore
You
it
can
and
just have
just
a
return
static
true.
page saying yes.
Yes.
Don't have to do anything.
Well, no,
I
no,
can
we need
make
an
that
API because you know
Oh yeah,
our,
of course we do.
we might even need a factory and a manager.
And some kind of business version as well,
Yeah, definitely.
in case someone has changed the implementation.
Yeah, well, because the days can change, you need to create proper abstractions to handle.
We
all that.
need security. We need to think about security.
And the database holding
Otherwise,
all
I
the-
can hack it and say no.
I could hack it and then eat cake every day. Yeah.
I was going the other way around. I was trying. Now you're like him better than me. He will give you cake on your name day.
Yeah. There probably is not a name day for me.
No, probably not.
No,
My
wouldn't.
name's kind of dated and unusual, and so you don't see it very often, and so it's never on anything, right? Like I have a coffee mug around here somewhere. Oh, it's up there. I'm not going to get it, but it says "What a guy," but it's right because that's the only way I can
Close
get my
enough.
name on products, right?
Close enough. Close enough.
I think my wife got it for me when we were in college.
Oh, she tried.
But
But you have a thing for old, outdated words, don't you?
Yeah, I really do. I do kind of like more. They're more poetic. They're a little more fun to say, and so I just like words in general. Actually, a lot of the older words tend to just be Germanic words that have fallen out of favor and replaced by words from Latin and French. And so, but they're still valid words.
We have gone the other way around in Sweden. We went from French words to German words. Well, now we're just flat out speaking English half the time. Not as bad as the Danish, though. But almost.
I'm frankly very grateful to be a native English speaker. It makes everything easier. It's kind of unfair, honestly, but roll the dice, you get what you get, right?
We have a lot of old words that is kind of horrific translated from English.
Yeah. And we think that people are, today, when people use those names, they're not thinking about the old words. They're just making them up. Yeah. Like, we take this American or English word and we put a spin on it and we call it our own. But turns out it's actually a word from the 1800s or something. So we have been speaking bad Swinglish.
Oh, that's a great portmanteau.
And English makes Stacy lazy. Stacy lazy, that's a rhyme. I think she means because she doesn't speak Dutch as much because she get away with English, I would say.
It's, I would imagine in some ways, especially working in tech, it's, it's hard to escape it. So English is just going to,
Oh, there we go.
English just sort of bakes its way into everything.
It does.
Is soft the word for software?
Swinglish. No, it's hanging out, chilling. It's chilling.
Taking it easy.
Taking it easy, yeah. So
how do you say it?
Softa.
Softa.
Yeah.
I put too much T on that though, didn't I?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Jessica's Danish, so we shouldn't.
Not Danish. I'm from the south of Sweden.
Actually, I do know one probably word that would be surprising to you that I know in Swedish, and that is I know the word for mullet, and it's hockey frilla, right?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Which would translate literally. It translates literally as hockey hair.
Yeah,
that would be how I would translate that.
Why?
What?
Why did you pick that word?
You don't even have a mullet.
I know. Well, anymore.
Well, there you go.
I do have a. I'm afraid to Google something on stream here, but I might just do it so you can see it. Maybe you should turn the screen sharing off and let me find the image first.
Yeah, let's do that.
I have a picture of me when I was 18 in high school. It was my senior high school picture. Let's see if I can zoom that up there. There we go. So
in the meanwhile, for those of you who want to check out the hockeyfrilla, or why did I pronounce that in semi-English? I have no clue.
Yeah, I said
the mullet. We have a song about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a music video. So can I share your screen?
Yeah. Here's a picture of me when I was 18 with my mullet. and that's very much a 80s sweater there. Like it was.
Yes.
The picture was taken in 1990.
Very much.
But the sweater was bought in 1989.
Nice.
So.
Nice. There you go. But why do you know the word? Or have you been knowing it since the 90s?
It's just one of the... No. It's actually my buddy that I mentioned earlier, Magnus. He just mentioned it randomly in a Slack one time. We were joking about mullets, and he just sort of plopped in in Swedish, it's this. And then it stuck in my head because it was funny.
It is.
Well, and it made sense because you think of frill like the feathers or the frill, or that means like, right? It's a word that makes sense to me. So it's easy to remember, and hockey's, easy to remember.
Now it makes sense. It doesn't make any sense in Swedish otherwise. It's just...
But there's a lot of words like that when we realize that this word comes from English, it's like, oh, now it makes sense.
Yeah. Or German. We have a lot of German
Yeah,
words
that's true.
which Swedish people can't. It's like the ketchup joke. You know, two tomatoes cross the road and one of them. Yeah, you know the one. So we Swedes are not the brightest people sometimes, especially when it comes to jokes. And I probably shouldn't say this, but we have, for the longest time, had this joke, but we have used the name for ketchup, which does not make any sense in Swedish, as in catch up.
Yeah.
Which the joke is doing. So we have just been laughing our heinies off. Come on, ketchup, with no catching up at all. We have makes no sense.
The connection with ketchup to catch up did not exist.
No,
Yeah.
nobody knew, and yet everybody is laughing at it.
Yeah.
Everybody
Come
laughs at the joke,
on,
but no one gets the pun.
Tomato
Yeah.
sauce.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, someone has done that as well. Come on, tomato sauce. And people are laughing. We're like, you're missing the point. But then again, we didn't find out until we started taking English, and suddenly it clicked. So, yeah.
There's something about puns when you learn them in another language that are much more, when you're learning another language, they make them more delightful than they are for the native speakers.
Yeah.
And where you hear them and you smile, it's like, that's really funny. And it's because it's new, right? It's like, you know, it's like, I just discovered this thing, and it's, you know, the first time, like the reason the ketchup joke isn't very funny in the US is because everyone's heard it since they were 3 years old.
Yeah, of course. And so have we, but it makes sense.
But, you know, and gotten the joke.
Yeah, exactly. That's the difference.
Sorry, that wasn't meant to be a dig, although it's kind of funny if it was.
It's true.
And so, you know, you know, the charm, we've already experienced the charm of it when we were 3. But when you're learning another language and then you see a pun in there, it's a lot funnier.
Yeah.
Like I can't remember the joke in Spanish, but the punchline is, you know, these two fish are talking, and then it's like, oh, you know, oh, my dad does this. What's your dad do? And the answer is nada. And in Spanish, nada means nothing, which is a word that's made its way into English. You're probably familiar with that. Mm-hmm. But it also means he swims.
Yep.
So then
sounds about the same as the ketchup issue we've had here.
So it's got 2 meanings. What's your dad do? Nothing. What's your dad do? He swims because he's a fish. Right? That's fun. And you know, and if you're a native Spanish speaker, you heard that joke when you were 3, right? It's
and it's not funny anymore.
Right, but I heard it and I laughed, and you know, I'm 49. But I speak Spanish like a 3-year-old, so there you have it, right?
Oh, there you go. We have this other saying in Swedish. So we have gingerbread for Christmas, and it's actually called pepper cake here because pepper was another name for medicine back in the day. But it is basically gingerbread, and for some reason, people who translated stuff coming in from Germany, they said it's a medicine. If you haven't been to the bathroom lately, you can eat some of these pepper cakes or gingerbread because it's will help things go along, so to say. Yeah. But in Swedish, we heard the word fast in German, which is schnell.
Yeah.
And we translated that to being nice, which is the Swedish word snäll. So it sounds the same. So in Sweden, we say you will become nice if you have more gingerbread. And nobody understands why they have to go to the bathroom. Nobody. So when we realized that, we were embarrassingly old, I would say. It's like, wait a minute.
But that I meet people that doesn't know that.
Yeah, of course.
Still, so.
Yeah.
Actually, we buy the same in our house. We buy the same ginger snaps, the little thin, crispy ginger crackers, crisps, or not crisps. That'd be the British word for potato chips. But we buy them
biscuit thingies.
Yeah, biscuits it would be the British word, but we like the really crispy ginger flavored cookies in the U.S. We call them ginger snaps because they snap when you like them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so we buy those all the time for Christmas. We actually buy the Swedish ones, so because they're delicious.
Is it the anise? The brand, is it anise?
I don't know. There's a store here called Pier 1 Imports. Or World Market. It's called World Markets, and they have a bunch of food items from all over the place, and they always have a bunch of them around Christmas time. And now you can get them at IKEA too.
Yeah, of course. Of course. You can get everything at IKEA.
You can
the
get
best ones
IKEA.
are anise.
Yeah, but we
Those
have
are
seen
really
those
good.
in the US. I don't remember where, but I think it must have been Seattle, because every time we're in Seattle, we meet someone who has a connection to Sweden, and it makes no sense.
To be honest, every time we go to the US, so where are
Yeah.
you from? Sweden. Oh, I always wanted to be there, go there. I have been there. I have
My family is
relatives
there.
there.
I know the word for hockey hair. Yeah.
There you go. Oh my gosh.
We have gotten way out into the weeds, haven't we? It's been
What
fun,
were you
though.
saying about going on a tangent?
Yeah. We took the tangent and we took it out in the backyard and out behind the woodshed and beat the hell out of it.
So the gingerbread is a lie. Which is
That's
funny
right.
because in Swedish, cookies are named cake. It's the same word.
Oh, that makes
Well,
sense. That's why the
almost.
word on the side of the tin looks like the word cake
Yeah.
more than it looks like the word cracker.
Yeah.
And I suppose they're not actually the same as ginger snaps in the U.S. because ginger snaps in the U.S. are pretty thick. They're
Yeah,
thick and hard,
yeah,
like
these are really
and
thin.
they make a snap when you break them, whereas these are thin and they just sort of, they just
And they have a
crumble
lot
and
of
dissolve in
other
your mouth
spices.
delightfully.
Yeah, there's a lot of other spices than ginger as well.
Yeah, and
I think
they're
it's,
a lot more
cinnamon
pungent.
and cardamom and what have you. A lot of spices.
They're much better actually.
Eat too many and you might get a headache.
It
Or
hasn't
a
happened to me
stomachache,
yet.
apparently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or get really nice.
Or get really nice.
You get really
it's
nice,
like
yeah.
gingerbread trifecta. We have gotten way out of control here, I think.
So do we have any other WebAssembly questions? I don't know. I feel like I
Do we have anything?
We do have the video for the mullet.
yeah.
Let's not have that one.
No, you have to
I do
check
have a
that
video where I cover some of the stuff that was in here as well, if that's helpful for
Oh,
folks.
that would be.
I gave a really fast, fairly fast talk at DevNation a few months ago. And DevNation puts all their content up on YouTube, and they do it with I don't know what the license is, but it's one of the open MIT Creative Commons-y kind of licenses. And so there's a YouTube channel called Coding Tech that picked it up. And Coding Tech took it, edited it a little bit, and published it. And it's got about 40,000 views so far. So
Nice.
apparently it's one of the better talks that I've done on WebAssembly as far as like setting context for people who want to understand it. Some of the code that I showed here is in that talk as well. So it's the same demos. But I'll see if I can find a link to that. But Coding Tech. As I type, I don't know if you can hear my keyboard or not.
We can.
It's just a mechanical keyboard ASMR, right?
So where do you think WebAssembly is going? We talked a little bit about future, but do you think that in the future we are going to see like libraries in WebAssembly? We're going to use that in JavaScript, or do you see 5 years from now where is WebAssembly?
I can say where I hope it is, and I think this is likely. And this is not my original idea, but it's a vision for where it can go, and I like it. It's there's a woman who works for Mozilla that does a lot of these. Her name's Lynn. Does a lot of the promotion around WebAssembly, and I watched a great video that she did where she talked about this idea of we got import, right? It's like, well, what if we could just use the import statement in JavaScript to bring in WebAssembly modules, right? And that'd be a nice direction. And so that takes you towards this world where you've got all these just modules of code sitting out there. and they can be written in whatever language, and they can be WebAssembly or they can just be pure JavaScript. And you're just importing them into each other like you would any other library. And so I think I'm hoping, I like this vision of the future where we have a lot of little modules that are easy to plug together and build things out of. And I think in some ways this is kind of inevitable. Like there's things that we're just going to need to write, and so they're going to get written. And then you're going to build on people's previous code, and we're going to get lots of layers of WebAssembly. And so I'm hopeful for that world where the interop between things gets a lot easier. And so it is to use a WebAssembly module would be as easy as putting import in my JavaScript, or even do that in something like Rust or something like that. So that's what I'm hoping. I think there's interesting potential in the fact that these WebAssembly is sort of compiled code. I mean, it's compiled code, but it's also easily distributed as data because they're just these little WASM files. And they're self-contained. They can be self-contained. And so you could easily put these on like a content distribution network. And then it's just like, okay, that's that WebAssembly module that I use. Or you can put them in, you can store them easily as bytes in a database. So they're really portable. You can hand them around easily. I actually played around with using a WASM time with Python to run WebAssembly inside of Redis. So I wrote a WebAssembly module. I put it in a Redis string. And then I have Python code that uses Redis gears. And you tell it the string, the key in Redis containing the WebAssembly module, and the key containing values you want to use. And then it pulls the bytes down, instantiates the module, goes out and retrieves the values, passes them into WebAssembly. WebAssembly does callbacks into the Python code. And so I was able to, run WebAssembly in Redis of all places.
That's cool.
I mean, it's kind of fun and ridiculous in a way, but it was just to see if I could do it right. I want to see how these pieces fit together because you learn a lot in those sorts of experiments. It's like, okay, here's how these things could fit together. Is there potential here or not? And so you start playing with it. But I could see WebAssembly being these sort of chunks of deployed functionality. I mean, because you can run them in your browser and you can run them in the server, they become things where like they could be really good for edge computing, like run them closer here, but then we could just run them back here. So the same code's in both places, like the same binary is in both places. And I think that's a particularly unique potential. Like you don't see that the same binary runs in both places anywhere else that I could think of. I mean, maybe applets, the 90s called, they want their bad code back.
I haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah.
There is apparently a WebAssembly Summit happening next Thursday as well. So
there is. It's going to be on their Discord server, and I am planning on being there. So you should check it out. It's called the WebAssembly Summit. I thought about submitting, but a lot of my talks are really just sort of introduction to WebAssembly, and the folks there are going to do the deep stuff that I don't do. So I think that'd be really cool to check out. I'm looking at WebAssembly as a tool I can use to build applications in interesting and sometimes ridiculous ways. They're looking at how they can improve the technology that is WebAssembly. So I think that's, I'm looking forward to it. I'm very much looking forward to it. So you should check that out.
Yeah, maybe we will.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're just about out of time.
Yeah. Perfect.
We couldn't have timed that better, could we?
Yeah, it's a gingerbread.
Run as fast as you can. Fun. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. Well, excellent. I appreciate you having me on here and let me sort of yammer on about WebAssembly and unusual words in Swedish. It was a really good time. It was actually really good to see you all again. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to being able to do this in person again.
Yeah, definitely.
It's been fun.
So
yeah,
I know there's some conferences that are announcing live dates at the end of July. So in the US,
I've heard.
There's a couple, and so I plan on submitting to them, and we'll see what happens.
We're still a little behind on the whole vaccine thing here in especially in Sweden, but most of Europe, I think, is still not
I know
up to.
NDC Oslo
10,
got pushed back, pushed out to a later date to accommodate that. But I think they're planning on doing it in person. I hadn't submitted to them originally because their timing was such. I'm like, will I be able to leave the country or not? It's hard to say. So
Yeah.
Will I
it's
be
a little too
able
risky.
to come back into the country?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's all
we'll
just kind of a
probably wait for
dicey
the next year.
proposition. But I'm looking forward to coming back to Europe, honestly. I miss hanging out in Europe.
Yeah.
I love it.
And us too, the US. Our supplies are running low.
Oh, what do you need? I can drop ship you something.
There you go.
We always buy like superhero T-shirts.
But the most important one is your drinks.
Yeah,
The crystal clear.
Crystal Light.
Crystal Light.
Oh, I
Sounds
drink those
like
all
a
the time.
drug.
Yeah. Yeah, but we can't get them here.
Yeah, it's just
And
this
we
little
ran
flavor
out,
packets for a
like-
bottle of water. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. And we ran out like 4 months ago or something. You even had the nastier ones that we didn't even enjoy. But yeah.
Well, after the stream, send me your address. I'll mail you some. I literally I have like 5 boxes of the things in my cupboard right now. I drink caffeinated
really?
ones every morning, so that's my caffeine source in the morning.
Yeah, that's
So.
basically the only water Jimmy drinks, if you can call that water. It's basically instant Red Bull.
Yeah, it's water in there.
Yeah, it is.
Somewhere.
It is.
Just
it
like
was
beer.
water, and then It's been great fun, though. It's
Yeah.
been.
Well,
Thank
excellent.
you
Well,
so much.
thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And we'll be back next week, next Thursday. And
Next
I believe
Thursday.
it's Uno on the menu.
I think so.
Yeah.
That will be interesting.
So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.